Let me be direct. To the leaders of the Sinaloa cartel, you are no longer the hunters. You are the hunted. You will be betrayed by your friends, you will be hounded by your enemies, and you will ultimately find yourself and your fates here in a courtroom in the Southern District of California.
America, the United States just arrested the first cartel leader ever charged as a terrorist under Trump's new fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction law. Pedro Inzunza Noriega, also known as the man in the chair, was captured on New Year's Day 2026 in a coordinated military-style raid in Sinaloa, Mexico. But here's what makes this absolutely historic. He's not just facing drug trafficking charges, he's facing narco-terrorism charges that carry mandatory life in prison with zero possibility of a plea deal.
U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order on Monday designating fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction.
What is up, guys? Tyson DeLaCruz here. Thank you so much for rocking with me. This arrest represents the biggest shift on how America fights cartels in decades, and the implications are absolutely massive. Let's break down exactly what happened on January 1st, 2026. Mexican military forces working directly with U.S. intelligence conducted a precise raid on a property in Sinaloa, Mexico, the heart of cartel territory. They arrested Pedro Inzunza Noriega along with 3 other individuals and seized firearms and drugs.
For years, Pedro Inzunza El Sagitario was described as the second in command, the trusted operator, the man who made things move behind the scenes. Here's the hook. This wasn't a random arrest. According to early reports, the operation was the result of months of investigation, surveillance, and a court-authorized search in a neighborhood of Culiacán.
Now here's what makes this raid different from every other cartel arrest that we've seen or talked about on this channel. This wasn't Mexico doing U.S. a favor. This was a direct result of President Trump's tariff threats against Mexico if they didn't move on high-value terrorist targets. The Mexican government finally allowed the level of military coordination that previous administrations never could achieve.
Under President Trump's leadership, the Department of Justice is on the front lines of this fight. We're standing shoulder to shoulder with all of our law enforcement partners to dismantle these narco-terrorists.
Attorney General Pam Bondi made it crystal clear. We're calling these drug kingpins what they are: international narco-terrorists that invade our country, threaten the sovereignty of our borders, and destroy our communities. They are terrorists, and they will prosecute them like they are terrorists. This is the Trump pressure effect in action. When you threaten the country's economy with tariffs, unless they cooperate with national security threats, suddenly, amazingly, they find the political will to go after targets that they've been protecting for decades. Now, let me explain why these charges are absolutely revolutionary here. Pedro Inzunza Noriega isn't being charged with drug trafficking, money laundering, or racketeering. He's being charged with narco-terrorism under material support of terrorism under 18 U.S.C. 2332A. This is the same statute used against Al-Qaeda operatives.
An indictment which our office unsealed today is the first in the nation to charge multiple alleged leaders of the Sinaloa cartel with narco-terrorism and material support of terrorism charges in connection with trafficking massive amounts of fentanyl.
This became possible because President Trump's executive order 14157, which designates the Sinaloa cartel as a foreign terrorist organization. But here's the part that most people don't understand. AG Pam Bondi removed the bureaucratic roadblocks that prevent these charges from being filed.
Under President Trump's directions, the United States State Department designated the Sinaloa cartel, together with 5 other cartels and MS-13 and TDA, as foreign terrorist organizations. The DOJ has already charged leaders of the Sinaloa cartel with narco-terrorism and supporters of TDA, MS-13, and CJNG.
Under the old system, U.S. attorneys had to get approval from the Department of Justice headquarters in D.C. before filing terrorism charges. That bureaucratic process meant these charges almost never got filed because it was easier just to charge them with drug trafficking. Bondi eliminated that requirement in 2025, giving U.S. attorneys the green light to prosecute cartels as terrorists without asking permission from D.C. bureaucrats. The Southern District of California immediately created a narco-terrorism unit within the organized organized crime sector. This wasn't some symbolic gesture. This was a declaration of war against the cartels using the full weight of American counterterrorist legal apparatus. Now let's talk about why fentanyl is being treated as a weapon of mass destruction. I covered it in full detail in a video a few weeks ago. It'll be somewhere linked on the screen if you want to check that out. On December 3rd, 2024, Mexican law enforcement raided multiple locations controlled by Pedro Inzunza Noriega and his son. They seized 1,500 kilograms, that is 1.65 tons of fentanyl. This, at the time, was the largest fentanyl seizure in world history. But here's what makes this a weapons of mass destruction case instead of just a drug case. 2 milligrams of fentanyl, the size of a few grains of salt, is an absolute lethal dose. That 1.65 ton seizure represents enough fentanyl to kill approximately 825 million people. That's more than twice the entire population of the United States.
If this were a war, that would be one of the worst wars. I believe they killed over the last 5 or 6 years, per year, 200 to 300,000 people.
The DOJ now classifies Inzunza's industrial-scale fentanyl labs as weapons of mass destruction as WMD production facilities. These aren't just some street-level drug operations. These are sophisticated criminal weapons manufacturing sites producing poison at an industrial scale for the specific purpose of flooding American communities. Pedro Inzunza Noriega earned his nickname, the man in the chair, because he was partially paralyzed in a shooting by a rival cartel. But my friends, don't let that fool you to thinking that he was weak. He was the second in command in the Beltran fraction of the Sinaloa cartel, one of the most violent and sophisticated drug trafficking operations in Mexico.
The notorious Pedro Inzunza Noriega and his son, Pedro Inzunza Coronel, are charged with terrorism and drug trafficking charges. They are described in court documents as leaders of one of the largest and most sophisticated fentanyl production networks in the world.
Since the early 2000s, Inzunza has been one of the top distributors of cocaine and fentanyl into the United States. His organization engaged in shootouts, murders, kidnappings, torture, and violent collections of drug debts to sustain operations.
Over the past several years, father and son have trafficked tens of thousands of kilograms of fentanyl into the United States.
But here's the personal tragedy that makes this arrest even more significant. In November, just weeks before his father was captured, Pedro Inzunza Coronel was killed by the Mexican Navy. The son who was being groomed to take over the empire was eliminated. And then the father was captured on New Year's Day.
Drug kingpin Ishmael Zambada Garcia, also known as El Mayo, has confessed to a lifetime of crime in service to the Sinaloa cartel. El Mayo will spend the rest of his life behind bars. He will die in a U.S. federal prison where he belongs.
Now here's where the new legal framework gets really brutal for cartel leaders. Under narco-terrorism and WMD charges, there's no plea deals. El Chapo fought a lengthy trial and still got life in prison, but at least he had the option to potentially negotiate. Under the 2025 guidelines, these charges carry mandatory life without parole and zero possibility of negotiation.
The narco-terrorists operate as a cancer within a state. They metastasize violence, corruption, and fear. And if left unchecked, their growth would lead to the death of law and order.
U.S. Attorney said it perfectly. If you act like a terrorist, you shouldn't be surprised if you're charged as one. This is the message being sent to every cartel leader in Mexico. The old rules are gone. You're not drug dealers anymore. You are enemy combatants in a war against the United States. And it's not just legal charges, it's military operations. Mexico has deployed nearly 10,500 members of their Army, Air Force, and National Guard to dismantle cartel infrastructure. America, the arrest of Pedro Inzunza Noriega on New Year's Day in 2026 represents a fundamental shift on how the United States fights the cartels. This isn't about intersecting drugs at the border or arresting street-level dealers. This is about treating cartel leaders as enemy combatants, using the full weight of Americans' counter-terrorist apparatus to eliminate them.
We will not rest until Americans are safe from these narco-terrorists. at President Trump's direction, we will continue to fight until every single cartel boss is behind bars and on American soil and in American prisons for the rest of their lives.
The designation of fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction isn't symbolic. It's a legal framework that allows prosecutors to charge cartel leaders with terrorism instead of just drug trafficking. The removal of bureaucrats' approval requirements means U.S. attorneys can move fast without waiting for permission from Washington. And the mandatory life sentence with no plea deal means there's no way out once you're caught. This arrest is proof of concept for every other cartel leader watching. The old system where you could fight charges for years, negotiate a plea deal, and maybe serve 20 years instead of life, that, my friends, is over. The new system treats you like Osama bin Laden. You are a terrorist. You're getting mandatory life and you're dying in American prison. Let me know what you guys think about this. Drop it down in the comment section down below. Smash the like button if you kindly would. Share, subscribe, and as always, guys, I'll catch you on the next one.